We're talking about old-fashioned ways to look at creative blocks and what the newer ways are to look at creative blocks so that you can address them and eliminate them. Cheers, Micah.
Cheers.
Oh my God. Hey, cheers, everyone. Welcome to
Creative Happy Hour.
That's right, where we get drunk.
On the creative possibilities.
Yes, we do. Every week.
Every week.
So join us, subscribe.
Yes.
Click on the little ding ding bell button.
Make a drink.
Make a drink
Get
for
ready
yourself.
to think about creativity.
Get ready to drink with us and get drunk on the creative possibilities.
Yep.
This week, we are checking out the old-fashioned.
Old-fashioned.
Yes, we are. And we're going to be talking about, because, okay, check out our old-fashioned. We've got these big old ice cubes.
So
Big
cool.
old block of ice in our old-fashioned.
Wow, you might need to be the new bartender because you make really
Oh, because I made an
drinks.
ice cube?
Yeah.
Awesome. And the old-fashioned's kind of like the easiest freaking drink to make. I'll tell you guys all about it. But why are we talking about the old-fashioned? How does it relate to creativity? Is that the old-fashioned is, we're talking about old-fashioned ways to look at creative blocks and what the newer ways are to look at creative blocks so that you can address them and eliminate them.
Yeah.
Right?
No one wants to
Why
be
not?
blocked creatively.
Yeah, and you
So-
don't want to stick to the old-fashioned methods. That's no
No,
good.
you want to get with
Let's
modern,
get newfangled.
modern times.
Let's
here.
get all modern.
Yes.
Okay, let's cheers again and taste.
Cheers.
Cheers to you.
I've been
And
waiting
let's-
for this all day.
Oh yes, we have. Okay, let's check. It should be pretty strong, I'm thinking, because it's all alcohol all the time.
Oh yeah,
That's pretty nice,
that's really good.
right? Okay, shit. No, she's gonna make me the bartender. I'm like, no, don't do it.
Yeah, you make
Don't
a
do
good
it.
drink.
Okay, so let's discuss the old-fashioned. So the old-fashioned is called an old-fashioned because even as early as 18 something, and I'm not gonna give you a date because I'm too tired for that shit. It's not happening.
Like she gives them when she's not tired. She can't give you a date.
No, when I'm not tired,
I mean, this is
try.
not a history show.
No, I know.
so-
But when I'm not tired, I try and I fuck it
Yeah,
up.
every
And then I'm
time.
like, oh, so now I've learned my
Yeah.
lesson. So no dates, sometime in the 1800s.
Yeah, I think it was the late 1800s. Yes.
That it was already known as old-fashioned.
Yes.
Because it was already like 100 years old.
Yep.
And it was developed somewhere. So they, as all of my favorite cocktails, which
Yeah.
they're like, oh, well, that story is not true. So the whole thing about
It's
it
a
being-
lie.
Everything's a lie, which I love. I love that.
I love Google. There's
Yeah.
so many lies on Google.
Right? And also, well, half the things that people tell you about how to deal with writer's block and creative block are lies too. So I think that works really well. But the whole story of it being developed in Louisville, Kentucky and all this shit, pretty much not true.
Yeah, Louisville is like
I
the.
don't know. I mean, bourbon, but otherwise, who cares? So basically, how do we make this? So the cocktail was a whole category of drink, and the old-fashioned being the first one. And then they moved it up to the Waldorf Astoria, New York, where I guess if you can make it there,
You can make it anywhere.
hell yeah, you can. So that's what they do. Like, that's where all of the drinks that we talk about, all the, you know, the Manhattan and all that shit,
Yeah.
like they all originated at the Waldorf
In some,
Astoria.
yeah,
which
old crusty
I kinda-
bar in
Yep,
the- in
crusty
New York,
bars
so-
with old crusty dudes
Yeah.
drinking them.
I love it.
So so I made it, so it's a cocktail basically was like sugar, bitters, and, you know, some kind of alcohol. Basically, that's the recipe.
Yeah, so it could be gin, it could be whiskey, it
Yes.
could be, I don't know, vodka.
Uh,
Usually not vodka.
no, vodka came later, but
It had to be like an old-fashioned spirit.
exactly. So whiskey, scotch, you know, rye of any kind,
Yeah.
bourbon would work, and then they started making them with gin as well.
Yeah.
So that's how, I mean, we can get flexible with all the shit, but I went old school. I did rye whiskey.
Okay.
So what I did is I took, okay, so you're supposed to do sugar, but since I'm a Marin County bitch suffering from allergies, I did honey,
Oh, yeah.
which I think gives it a little bit of richness.
It gives, yeah,
right?
it gives it like a.
You're like, what the fuck have you done? No, it's good.
No, it's good. It goes with the whole like
Yeah.
bitter. I don't know. It has an
does.
old. I mean, honey is kind of an old-fashioned
It's an
sweetener,
old-fashioned,
right?
That's what I thought.
So
that's what I told,
it
yeah,
kind of
I
goes
was
with
like,
the theme.
Yeah, I
the
was like, I'm not
old-fashioned
doing
theme.
molasses, but I can do honey. So that's what I told myself. So I did honey, and I did the Angostura bitters.
I
which
love
are
those. I could just
traditional.
drink those.
They're kind of yummy.
They're
I know.
yummy.
I could wear them as perfume. Was what I was thinking. I
Oh,
was
yeah.
like, oh, I could do the bitters perfume.
Yeah.
And then so I kind of muddled that stuff together, and then I added a splash of water, so that we wouldn't go too crazy. And then I bruised some lemon rind. You can, a lot of people use orange, but lemon actually was the original, and that's what I did. And then I put in our rye whiskey.
Loving it.
Loving it. And then, of course, poured it over our giant ice cube. Ta-da, our block. Our creative
block is in the glass.
So that's what we did. So who drank this thing? Lots of intellectuals, no doubt. Lots
Yeah.
of industrialists. Don Draper in Mad Men. You
Yeah.
know, is that kind of drink.
Again, lots
right?
of dark wooden stain and library
Totally, and that's
leather.
yeah, and that's what
cognac leather.
right. That's totally what it tastes like
Yeah.
too, isn't it? Like it's like
Yeah,
okay,
it tastes like a cognac leather belt with some honey slathered on it.
I
feel like I should have a cigarette. To be
oh my
honest.
god, I would love to have a cigarette.
Right?
Seriously. And by the way, can I just say that nicotine is like such a good fix for creative block and for mental frazzle.
Oh yeah.
I'm just
It
saying
really is because
that,
it increases dopamine.
Right?
The nicotine increases dopamine in certain parts of the brain.
See? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it actually, I took a whole class on the brain years ago.
Yeah. And I'm not encouraging vaping or anything, but I mean.
No, but they
good old
do,
cigarette.
they did a lot of studies with schizophrenics.
Yes, they did.
And they would chain smoke, and it would essentially help relieve some of their schizophrenic symptoms.
Awesome. Well,
that would explain why I was into chain smoking.
Exactly. Well, we both were. We both were. But I think a nice like Nat Sherman, like the Nat Sherman, the black
I call
and
them
gold.
brownies. I call them
Yes,
brownies.
the black and gold. They're awesome.
Delicious.
So good. We could have, should have.
Yeah.
Shit.
Next
See?
time.
Missed opportunity.
Yeah.
Oh, well, hey, at least we have something to look forward to.
Well, yeah. I mean, maybe we'll get a little more
Yeah, no. So, okay,
a little risky.
What else about the taste? I mean, I think the flavor is exactly as you described it. I mean, I think that you're totally on with that old library thing, and I think that that's perfect because it brings about.
Yeah, it's definitely got some flavor depth.
Totally.
For sure.
So I think that since we made it so simple and so cool, we can start talking about our main subject right away, which is isn't that so easy and wonderful? We can start talking about our creative blocks.
Yes.
And so have you experienced a creative block recently? Do you have a personal creative block story to share with us?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that happens to me. I don't take it too seriously because
Which I think that that's really cool, actually, that you don't take it seriously.
I don't take it too seriously because I'm one of those people that has lots of different interests. So
that's pretty key.
I will just, like often I'll have 3 different books I'm reading. I'll read like a nonfiction book and a fiction book and a knitting book and a this book and so so I'm like, oh, I'm not into that right now, so I'll explore this other thing.
I think that that's a really modern way of looking at it because I think the old-fashioned attitude when it came to writer's block, I think that today people are starting to evolve in the way they look at it because I think that before it was like, oh, the muse visited me,
right,
and now the muse has left me and I'm fucked,
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's the way that we look at things anymore. And what you're saying makes so much sense of if you're a multi-passionate creative,
right,
that one inspiration is gone, but that's not we kind of start to realize that it's not a permanent kind of situation. And I think that having those interests that we can bump between is kind of a fabulous thing. And I was telling you earlier on about Julia Cameron and The Artist's Way, how, she had all that. And like, she's kind of a classic. I mean, do you remember? I mean,
I own the book. In fact, I was looking at it last weekend.
We're going to have to do a deep dive on that.
I was looking at, we should probably have a whole show on The Artist's Way. And in fact, Max, who we interviewed for Creative Conversations, he used to lead Artist Way groups.
Oh,
so he would have,
okay.
I mean, it was like, kind of had a 70s vibe. But
it does have a 70s vibe. Like, I think there's some things in The Artist's Way that are kind of timeless and that totally work, in so many ways. But I think that, and the one thing that I think that Julia Cameron was totally onto was that she realized that creative blocks really stem from the ego.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a very more modern mindset to have because, you need to kind of recognize your own responsibility in the writer's block. And she says that, the morning pages aren't just some woo thing to do. She's like, don't even read them, like torch them.
It's an exercise.
It's an exercise to
get the ego off your back.
Totally.
So that you can just, because what you were saying earlier was that the perfectionism.
Yeah.
That'll kill you. This constant reflection on like, what are people going to think about what I write, or what are people going to think about what I'm doing? And I mean, there's often times that I will knit or crochet something, and I know a lot of people don't think that knitting and crocheting is an art form, but it is. And I will knit or crochet something, and I will take it apart.
Yeah,
I will.
No big deal. Right?
I mean, I remember the first time that I learned how to knit socks. I must have knitted the same pattern 30 times. And then I would rip it apart and I would do it again.
Well, it's like the author you were talking about. Remember before, who had his work destroyed over and over and over?
Oh, yeah.
And he kept writing it. Remind me of his name.
Gregory.
Yeah, something like that.
Oh, he wrote Shantaram.
Shantaram. Yeah, that's it.
Or Davis Gregory.
Okay, the author of Shantaram, and we're going to put it up if
we
I'll
have
find
to put
it.
it up
I'll put
because
it up there.
everybody
So,
should
yeah.
read it. It should be required
Again,
reading.
this is why you guys should subscribe.
But yeah, when he
on
was in
YouTube,
prison, they
but
kept
also
destroying
on,
his manuscript. And I think the same thing happened to Viktor Frankl. I think that also, I don't know if it was the Nazis. I'm sure it was the Nazis. But,
well, I'm guessing it. Yeah, they were kind of the quintessential bad guys.
Yeah, but you know, it's funny, you know, that it just, I think, you know, it's kind of like, well, who was I telling, you know, with my daughter, I was talking about how, well, if you create all these barriers for them all the time and you have all these rigid rules about what they can and can't do, they just get better at going behind your back, right?
Totally,
they become more strategic.
Well, I think that, I mean, we always joke about the obstacles the way.
Yeah.
But, I mean,
but we're not joking.
No, we're not joking, actually, because, I mean, we joke about the fact that we bring it up so often.
Yeah.
Is what it is. But you're so right. I think that having those constraints actually is a really good way of breaking through the blocks. And I think that seeing, you know, I mean, that is actually a fun way, instead of giving yourself, because so we were going to talk about the old fashioned. So first of all, let's talk about the old fashioned advice for writer's block, because I think a lot of it's a little bit bullshitty.
It's a little bullshitty, but it's most people, it's recognizable. Most people,
yeah, we've heard it a million times.
Yeah, most people are like, oh yeah, but you know.
This is what I'm supposed to be doing. So what's your favorite piece of bad writer's block or creative block advice?
Oh God. I guess.
I like go outside. I like go outside.
I'm having a block.
You're having a block. She's having a block. So this is fresh in my mind because I've been working on my final draft of my book. Writer's block is a pain in the ass. So I've been like totally looking at all of the crappy advice. So one of my favorite ones is get outside.
Get outside.
Out of the house. And I'm like,
get outside, everybody.
Like, really?
Get outside.
I mean, come on. Like, I think.
Get outside yourself.
Right. Again.
Yeah. We should do like old fashioned
and the
modern.
new age.
It would be like get outside, and then the new way would be like get outside yourself.
Yeah, step outside your ego. What do you think of the get outside?
Slay your ego.
Slay your ego. Just what do you think of the go outside advice?
You know, I do that too. I do go outside. I'll go for a hike, but it's
a balance. But I don't think it's as a reaction to a block. I think it's something to balance your life.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like if I'm not feeling, because that's what I think blocks are. I don't think that you're actually blocked. I actually think that a block is you're not allowing some emotional.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. We're going to
happen.
Exactly. And we're going to be talking about those new explanations of why we have writer's block rather than it's just this big problem that visited us. I think that's
what the muse was. I think the muse was, you know, it was associated with romantic partners or people. It had this romantic thing. Right. And that was just it was a way of talking about the emotional experience of a creative
totally
drive.
And of something, and also but it wasn't a drive. See, that's where I think that the muse was old fashioned. I think the muse was a problem because it put the motivation for creating outside of yourself. And I think that that's bullshit. I think that's an old-fashioned way of looking at it. Yeah. In fact, I mean, let's address that right now.
No, I think that's actually a very good point.
Where I think that motivation is one of those blocks. And so in my book, I break down into 3 different categories. I have an information breakdown, which can lead to blocks. I have a motivational breakdown, and I have the inspirational breakdown. And those are like kind of the 3. And, you know, they manifest in different ways, and they have different causes. But I think that, and finally, the block is just kind of a symptom of those breakdowns.
Right. Because you could probably get caught up in any one of them. Like, if you over-research something.
Yeah, then, I call it researchitis.
So then you lose your own, you lose your own critical thoughts about the topic. You know, because, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, most topics, most people don't have anything extremely original to say.
No, it's the way of saying it.
But it's a way of saying it.
So you were talking about the researching things, and so I was saying that
you can research something to death, and you can lose your own voice. Yeah, so about why you're writing about it to begin with.
Yeah, you can get the researchitis because you know sometimes you get a block because you don't know enough, right? So then you're going to go and you're going to research it, but most of it is how you put that information together and how you feel about it. So I was reading about Naomi Wolf, who wrote The Beauty Myth, right?
Right.
The Beauty Myth. Her latest book came out. It's got a very serious title about sex and criminalization.
Yeah.
And, again, facts not our forte, but again, we did our research. However, we forgot. We're a little tired.
But it's more about the concept.
It's more about the concept, but for her too. So she was confronted during an interview with BBC about the facts.
I love BBC because
they're like, bitch, you were wrong. So she'd done all this research on this book, and one of the things, she'd literally misread a legal phrase.
Ooh.
And she was confronted about it, and I actually think she was very kind of gracious about it, where she was like, oh, wow, okay, well, I'm going to need to check that and correct that. Whatever, that's fine. But really, she wasn't
what the hell was her
destroyed.
editor when...
Number one, absolutely, because that's the editor's job much more than the creative's job. Because even though she writes essays about it, she's a creative. She is. So yes, that's her editor's job. But I like that her attitude was not like, that's it, I'm over. Like,
yeah,
I'm never gonna
your
write again.
attitude has to be like, okay, well,
yeah, thanks for letting me know.
Yeah,
and
you have.
Moving right along.
That's the only way that you're going to survive
creating.
being a creative.
Exactly.
Because there's just no other way.
Yeah.
You have to be open to criticism.
Oh my God. So that's another major one. So a lot of people stop creating because they're afraid of the criticism.
Right.
And again, that's a modern thing. I think that's not modern. That's an old-fashioned
It's an old-fashioned
thing that people have been so sensitive to the criticism.
Yeah.
But I think that in our modern times, I think that we get exposed to way more criticism than anybody, well, on a bigger scale.
On a bigger scale, and I think that's that goes back to that psychological concept where if you're gonna have a heart attack on a street, you should have it on a street where there's only 2 people as opposed to 1,000 people, because the responsibility gets distributed among all those people, so people feel less responsible for helping you.
So, but
whereas
also
if there's 2 people,
then
they feel responsible. So
Yeah.
I think that now that more and more people were exposed, we're kind of, it's so diluted that we don't know who to take seriously anymore.
Yes, A, we don't.
And
but B, when somebody says something, it kind of gets shared. Somebody says something horrible, and it gets shared among all of the witnesses to what's happened.
Right.
And we're so now completely inoculated against the
so if anybody is
yeah.
sensitive to that, I mean, it's definitely going to keep them from being creative.
Absolutely.
Whereas for me, it works the opposite. I feel like, there's
nobody's
so
watching.
many people that nobody's watching.
Yeah, that's kind of what I feel.
I'm just listening to my own podcast.
Totally, which we love doing. We actually enjoy it a lot. And if we have like one person comment and say that they listened and they liked it, it makes me so happy. I'm just like, oh, that's so nice.
Yeah.
Much happier than if 1 million people clicked on me. I'd be really happy if 1 million people.
I mean, come on, people.
Yeah, that's not. But it
this.
does make me happy to think of that one person. And
Sure.
in no way is the thought of criticism really going to impact me that much, because you're going to get it. You're going to get the criticism nonstop. So that's kind of interesting. So then the whole thing, we were talking about the motivation, right? So we said one of the steps is motivation. And I think that before, an old-fashioned thing, to think of the muse, and the muse was such a lofty thing that you had to serve the muse.
Sure.
And that was messed up.
Yeah.
Because it had to be excellent. Or maybe you were doing something for God, or you were doing something for fame, or you were doing something to be part of the pantheon. I mean, talk about pressure. That's just not the right motivation.
I mean, I've been trying to get into the Pantheon.
Oh, the Pantheon, man. It's like, it's not a nightclub, Micah.
I thought it was a nightclub all this time. I just thought I had to have the right shirt and the right lipstick.
You're like, where's the bouncer at the Pantheon?
I just thought I needed, to look
just
a little
more
better.
lipstick and you're good. Yeah. No, I think that the modern way, the new way of trying to find motivation is to realize that it's not about money, it's not about fame. It's finding those little things that motivate you. So for us, it's going to be that one listener who's like, oh my God, you guys, you really touched me. I listened to this thing and it made me happy. Like, that's one little manageable thing that we know that if we create this certain snippet of content that we can make somebody's day. I mean, my God, that's so much better.
Yeah, it's
and more manageable.
Super meaningful.
Super meaningful. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, the motivation factor, I think I was saying earlier, it comes down to, what is it that you're trying to create and why are you doing it?
Why are you doing it? What are the real reasons?
What are the real reasons? And if you're not doing it, be honest with yourself about why you're not doing it. You know, a lot of people will say, I don't have any time, or
Yeah, you do.
I don't have the space to do it, or I don't, you know.
And that's where you break it down into much smaller pieces. So if you don't have the space, can you do a little small sketch of what your concept is that maybe you can do later?
I don't have the equipment.
Right.
I
And
don't
again,
have the...
let's break it into steps.
Yeah.
Let's break it into steps. And that's where people didn't think of it. They thought of this end project, you know, and it wasn't about the how-to. I think in the age of YouTube and stuff where people have all of these how-to videos, I think that that idea of figuring it out yourself and going step by step without having this formal education, I think that's helping us a lot too, where it comes to creative blocks. And you were listening to Marie Forleo talking about
everything is figure outable. And that was, you know, and it's funny because I turn it on right when I'm feeling like, shit, I gotta go film the podcast and I need to go to the grocery store, but it's Memorial Day and I need to get there and I'm running late and I really need eggs. And I mean, I know that sounds ridiculous.
But it's the little things that can block you. You know what I mean? It's those
little
things.
You know, and then I'm like, oh gosh, and I'm going to start this new job and I have this list and I'm thinking about the schedule and the ballet carpool and all this bullshit. And then, and then I'm like, but my priority is the next thing in line. The next thing in line is...
What's next?
I'm supposed to be at Karena's.
And she's texting me already.
And she's like, bitch, where are you? And
kind of.
I mean, I know that's what you meant.
I'm very poetic.
Yeah. And, you know, but so I think that's a thing that you can really... you know, ground yourself in the tangible next step, the sequence of the day. Like, okay, you made a commitment to be somewhere by 5:30.
Totally.
So go to the commitment, even if you feel frazzled.
I mean, when we
put
both
some lipstick on and change your attitude.
That's what we did. When we both sat down here, we were both like, oh my God.
How am I going to do this?
How am I going to do this? And you know what? Maybe we're not as lively and vivacious as sometimes, but you know what? We're getting our message out there and maybe we're a little frazzled and messed
we're following through with our creative commitment.
We're doing that.
And I think that's right. That's really what this is ultimately about.
And we did step by step. We did the minimum amount of research. Sometimes it shows. We we set up our equipment. Like, it's just little steps that we
and if the BBC wants to give us any feedback on
feel free.
You can that we said was wrong, go ahead.
Fact check us.
Go ahead.
All day long. It's awesome.
Yeah, I love it.
So other pieces of totally right. Other pieces of advice that I have heard about writer's block, or especially writer's block, but creative block as well, is start a schedule. And I kind of think that's the dumbest piece of shit I've ever heard in my life.
Will kill any creative venture is making a schedule.
Like, the idea of actually making a really strict, like, I mean, yes, I get the commitments. Like, we'll put it in our calendar. We're like, we have to be here to do that.
Every time we schedule. But I don't, it's not like, we do have the schedule of like, every Monday, you know, we do our filming.
Well, yeah. But saying I have to write for 2 hours every day, or I have to paint for an hour and a half every day, or I have to knit at exactly this time every day. Like, I think it totally is so much pressure in our modern lives where our schedules are so fucked up. That is an old-fashioned way of looking at it. Like, before, maybe when daylight, you know, marked the end of your day and then you could put on the candlelight and knit your socks, it's a different story. You know, if you weren't going to the town meeting or whatever like that, you know? I mean,
although the book, The War of Art, you know, he talks about, you know, fighting resistance, and he will talk about how every day he goes in and he writes for 2 hours and he doesn't look at it. He doesn't read it.
Which is kind of morning pages.
It's a ritual. And he was like, I don't ask myself, did I write anything good? I ask myself, did I write?
Yes, but I think I think in that, and I love what he writes. There's so much value in that, but I think that's old-fashioned because I think that he has the luxury of having those 2 hours.
But the old-fashioned has sustained because it has. There are things about it that are important. Like, and I think, you know, like, if you're losing, if you're losing, then if you're
she's gonna be okay.
If you're learning to play a musical instrument,
yes,
you do have to play because your brain depends on the repetitive.
Absolutely, and the muscle memory and everything else. That's the. I think that so that's another thing. I'll put in this little caveat that I think you need to be pretty aware of what it is exactly that you're doing, because some things like painting, You don't need to paint
I
every
agree
day
with
to get
that.
better.
I agree with that.
But musical instrument is a completely different thing.
Yeah.
And writing, you can procrastinate a little bit and be thinking of your story. Like, I'll take notes on my storylines and I'll do stuff. Like, if I don't have time to, and the guilt that I feel that builds up, man, when I sit down to write,
that can block you. If you're feeling guilty.
Okay, the guilt can block you, but the guilt, when you finally sit down to do it, you can feel really motivated, be like, okay, now I'm going to get a lot done. But then, of course, then it can come to screeching
It depends on who you are, though.
Yeah,
Guilt can be very debilitating for some people.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of like debilitating mental conditions, like I think that another old-fashioned thing was just assuming that we were all equal in front of this muse of ours. And I mean, then there was like, okay, artists can be a little crazy, this and that. And these days, I think we're a lot more aware of people's mental differences and people's different,
levels.
I mean, some of us have anxiety, some of us have ADD, some of us have OCD. I mean, some of us have.
Some are just lazy, like
some
me.
of us are lazy as shit. But I mean, we definitely have to learn how to deal with ourselves personally and be kind to ourselves, I think, because trying to push through these things when you're actually a cuckoo, like mental mess, and I'm not being cruel saying this, like I'm including myself in that whole thing. It's like you have to understand.
If you're negotiating some kind of mental ailment, like a real mental sickness, depression. I don't know what the other ones are. Schizophrenia.
Schizo is a good
I mean,
one.
we're not doctors.
No, we're not doctors. Well,
We play one on TV.
We play some on TV.
No,
but
I mean,
it's good.
You know
to
who
actually,
you are,
right? But like, give yourself the tools. Like, forget all the stupid old-fashioned advice.
Yeah.
Like, literally, maybe medication that's never been listed as a piece of advice to breaking through blocks, but that's a real piece of advice that you probably need to follow. If you want to be successful.
Yeah.
Because it's major. And then the emotional.
Are you trying to tell me I should go on medication?
I'm not.
I'm joking.
I'm not. But then there's the emotional thing too. I mean, sometimes you're too much of a freak show to actually do something good. You know what I mean? Like, I know some people who pressure themselves to achieve something creative no matter what their mental state is, and they haven't worked through what's going on, emotionally for them. Like, they've broken up with somebody, they're crying every day, and then like, and I have to finish this chapter. I'm like, I would actually probably settle this issue first, because your chapter is not going to be very good. What do you think? I mean,
I think sometimes, and I've done this in my life, I actually will excessively kind of overly focus on personal issues, or kind of exacerbate them or dramatize them. Well, so I don't have to do what it is that I'm wanting to do. So it's almost like, and I've seen people do it. It's like they create drama in theatricals so that they can avoid doing what they're supposed to be doing.
But it's almost an art form.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's interesting and entertaining for other people, but if you're one of those people that is creating drama or becoming excessively emotional about situations that you don't need to obsess about, you're taking away energy creatively.
Yeah, you're not doing yourself a favor.
Yeah, you're using your creative energy to focus on these things that aren't really ultimately that important, and then and it's an excuse, I think. Right. And I've been guilty of it myself.
But see, that's where I'll say that maybe the old-fashioned stuff was superior at that point, because back in the day, if somebody was sitting there ranting about their own personal drama, someone would be like, get the fuck over yourself, or like, write about it, Bronte, but like, or they would totally be like, no, come on, stop. Right. And people didn't have the luxury of, crying about themselves for that long and having people's attention, because now that's the other thing with social media and everything. You can cry about how sad you are, and all these people are like, oh honey, I'm so sorry, even though they don't care, but you're gonna feel like they do, and you're gonna feel like it's much more important.
That's weird. I don't know, I don't watch stuff like that.
No,
it's so creepy.
It is creepy, but that's clickbait. That's what they call clickbait now, where people are like, I'm so sad, and like, a picture of them crying on YouTube or whatever, and people are all clicking on it because they want to know why they're so sad. That's
weird.
Maybe it's a form of weird art. I don't know, but I feel like I'll go back to the old-fashioned way of being like, shut up and get over it. You're not
pull
that
yourself up by your
right?
bootstraps,
Exactly.
kind of thing.
Right?
Yeah.
So then another piece of old-fashioned advice is just sit down and focus.
Oh, jeez.
Right? I mean...
Yeah, who's good at that? Not me.
No, not me. I think that...
I have a hard time sitting down.
That too. I mean, exactly. But I think that now we have kind of a more healthy mindset where we think, you know what? why don't I do things that are kind of these easy to negotiate small steps that I can move forward in whatever I'm doing? Again, like moving just the goalpost, like closer to the goalpost, basically, or moving the goalpost closer, whichever sports analogy you want to use. I don't do sports, but doing something that will advance your creative identity, i.e., do you want to, send out an email to somebody who has interest in your, who's expressed interest in your work? Or do you want to do something that inspires you that is going to directly, inspire?
Do you want to take a class? Do you want to read a book on the subject?
Yes.
Do you,
something that's
I've
really...
definitely been one to I took all those fiber classes at Winter Farm, and, it's... And then I realized, I do like spinning, and I do like making yarn and fiber, but I really like creating things with the yarn.
I don't think it's necessarily the best use of your time.
Yeah, sometimes you want to be the person that makes the beer, and sometimes you want to be the person that drinks the beer, right?
I know which one I am.
And and you just kind of have to know who you are in that equation.
Which I think is great. I think it's good to know who you are, too, because I think that the old discussions about creative blocks kind of took a one-size-fits-all
I think so
angle
too.
to it. And I think that now we're kind of understanding more, there's so many different forms of creativity. It doesn't need to look like a certain thing anymore.
Right.
And I think that that's very refreshing because so many people guilt themselves into thinking that, my form of creativity doesn't matter. But look at this woman that we covered who basically spills her espresso on the table every morning.
And she makes paintings, really beautiful paintings.
Which is amazing. But that's... there's such a variety of things that you can do, or people who are making cupcakes, and that's
I would have just started I would have, if I spilled my coffee, I would have been
I'm not going to my coffee.
I would have gone
I'm tired.
Completely batshit.
Yeah, you've been like, I'm tired now. I'm not going to do anything all day.
I give up.
I give up. That's so sad.
I am creatively blocked now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that But I think that piece of, advice of just focusing on the one thing is not going to help anyone. I mean, I'm kind of physically incapable.
Glass half empty. Glass completely empty.
This is beyond half empty.
Well, I liked my drink, and she clearly...
I know, I love my drink. I'm just so freaking out of it today. I'm beyond, I'm trying to hold it together.
Yeah, well, this is really a happy hour for me because it was a rough day. It's Memorial Day, and I had to actually work today. Can you imagine? People were like, sorry. It's so unfair. And I was like, life isn't fair.
Life isn't fair for some of us. Okay, well, let's actually talk about that side because so many pieces of writer's block advice from the past or creative block advice, I never once, even though artists have never been known to be uber wealthy, whatever, I've never once heard piece of it.
Spit it out, lady.
I've never heard ever pieces of advice about what to do when your creative block or your writer's block comes from poverty or from lack of resources. And I mean, poverty or trying to hustle and trying to balance your life, I mean, that brings about A, lack of time, B, lack of resources, C, lack of space,
and
D, fatigue.
Freaking exhaustion.
Right.
I mean, that's probably the biggest thing. I mean, you've seen me yawning on the on because I work 2 jobs to make ends meet.
So how do
and
you...
and I'm not an impoverished.
No, but
I mean, compared to the people, we live in a very affluent community. So, most people that live here are driving a Tesla and living in a mansion.
And they spend their days getting their hair done and do whatever. And the sad thing too is that you talked about taking a few classes, but for us, taking classes is not always an economic reality.
No.
But so how do you find that you compensate, with the lack of resources? I mean, what I do is I kick myself because sometimes I feel like, okay, if I had more resources, I'd be able to do things on a bigger level.
Yeah, and I, again, I consume a lot of things that remind me that it's not necessarily about money. Fiona's
barking.
Fiona's pissed.
She couldn't be with us sitting between us, so she's gonna bark at everything outside.
She's just gonna
cool. That's gonna happen.
That's fine.
She's being creative.
Yeah,
she has no creative blocks
creating
today.
problems, but
exactly.
But I mean, I think I often will, have these. I mean, I remember when Alex was little and I lived in this dingy little moldy apartment, and I had to go up and down all these stairs to do the laundry. And I was a single parent. She was like 18 months old. And I would put her in a backpack, and I would get my laundry. Oh yeah, we did everything in a backpack because she was tiny, and I would just put her in a backpack. And I would tell myself things like, I'm getting the best workout. I'm gonna have the best ass from doing these stairs.
Total.
And I think, you know, you have to get creative about creating the proper mindset.
I think you do.
And I mean, that's where the whole, you know, I created my inner husband.
Yes, I love your
inner husband. He's a great guy.
He's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, so the inner husband, and I think every woman should have one.
Yes.
I created him so that I wouldn't get pissed off about the fact that I do everything on my own. So when I take out the garbage and recycling, really it's my inner husband that's doing it. So I can kind of detach.
You can detach
from being pissed off about the fact that like this is a man's job and he should be taking out the garbage and the recycling, and I'm too tired to do it.
So you're able to compartmentalize. So that's how you're
So you have to get creative literally about, and then you kind of burn through these false narratives about you know, I'm not, you know, and I even joke and say, we're not poor.
Right, we're not poor. We're European. And that's another one. So I was going to mention our friend.
You flip the narrative.
Totally.
You flip the narrative.
We have a mutual friend who's an artist who is a very, very gifted artist and working artist. That's her full-time profession. She works at it all the time. And life is expensive here. And if she were living in, you know, Arkansas, which... but she'd be...
They might be making a commune there soon.
I don't know about that state, but yeah. But if she were living anywhere else, she'd be living great. But she's living in California, and it's super expensive. But she has learned to just isolate the things that are important to her.
Right.
And she's made this beautiful life for herself. She's very European in that way, and she's not European, but she doesn't give a shit about what she drives. She can drive the shittiest car in the world.
I don't care about that either.
And it can break down every minute, and that's not a big deal. But she needs, you know, any resource, she's going to pour it into buying another board that she can paint on, or buying an antique that's going to motivate her. And then she does a lot of trades where she's like, okay, you know I'm spending a lot of time doing other things that are necessary for me to survive. And that's what I was saying about when you're working at something else and you're frustrated that you're not doing your artistic activity, but then I think you come back at it with so much motivation, you know.
Yeah, you do. I mean, because you're and also when you start doing it, you realize that no one has time really. You have to make time.
Yes,
and
that's so true too. Nobody just magically has time.
And we tell ourselves like, oh, you know, someone was asking me about how, you know, how do you do it? You're a single mom and you work 2 jobs and you know, and all of these things, and I said, you know, I don't carve out 2 hours. I mean, sometimes, you know, if I have a day, and it's rare that I do, I'll carve out some time and I'll go, you know, to the yarn store, or I'll do, you know, but generally it's like 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, and I cobble it together.
See, and that's really important, because I think that when you try to make that schedule or you try to make that work habit and it doesn't end up working out for some reason that's exterior to you or some reason that's tied to the realities of your situation, I think that your brain ends up convincing you that your creative pursuit is not going to work out.
It's not going to work out,
worth it, and that it's not as important as the other imperatives in your life. And I think that that's a really dangerous mindset to get into. So I think it is very important. Again, we circle back to the motivation mindset.
Yeah, because the mind goes where I mean, it kind of goes where you lead it.
Totally. It's like when you're driving and you're looking over here. You know, that's where you're
have to tell yourself the right story.
Totally. Yeah. And that's why I think that, so the old fashioned way is doing this, doing that, doing this, doing that to try to fix this problem. Whereas I think the modern way of dealing with a creative block is to change your mindset so that you can eliminate the sources of, you know, that are causing this symptom. That's the different way to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, because, I mean, in my 20s, when I was probably at the height of being creative and I had all kinds of time on my hands, I could not get my shit together to actually do something creative.
Well, because I don't think the motivation was truly there.
No, and it was also like, oh, I'm supposed to be doing this. I'm supposed to go to school. I'm supposed to do this. And, you know, I had all these rules about what I was supposed to accomplish by a certain age.
And that, can I just I'm just going to interrupt for 1 second, because those rules that you give yourself, those kind of things where you're like, this must happen, I must be the youngest, you know, I need to write my book by 25 and I need to have painted, you know, X and have a show. I think that overwhelms you completely. And
Yeah.
then that circles us back to our friend Marie Forleo, where she talks about overwhelm.
Yeah.
And the steps that you need to take to eliminate that, which
You
are
do.
again, like mindset.
Yeah,
based.
it's all about these stories that you tell yourself. And now I am more busy than I've ever been. I have more responsibility than I've ever had. And I make things happen more frequently.
I love what you're saying about I make things happen.
Yeah,
Like,
I do.
And the story you tell. So like you're saying I'm not passive and I'm not the victim in this story.
No.
I'm an actor who can make things happen.
Yeah, and I used to, honestly, I mean, in my 20s, I had a lot of bad breakups, and I had, I was
Trauma.
yeah, and I was kind of, going, like, dealing with, I guess, processing my childhood, really fucked up childhood.
Well, yeah.
And now
That takes energy.
It does. But I realize, like, I look back at it now, and if you're somebody that's doing that, don't waste your time doing that. I just think that it's like,
that.
I think there's people that are really into therapy and maybe they
Yes.
need it and all of those things. But I look back and I think, why did I think that I needed to process that shit?
Right. Sometimes just moving on is the best way to spare yourself the energy and the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so funny because I spent so much. I mean, a lot of people would tell me that my brain was wired a certain way because of my trauma or whatever I went through, and maybe I healed it.
But I think the processing is also the way your intellectual process works. You enjoy processing things.
I do. I do like
mean?
to process
and
things.
I think that was something that was easier for you than the other responsibilities that you had in a weird way, even though it was very tough processing these very hard things. You were making sense of it in your mind, and that's what you do so well.
It was useful for something, I guess. I don't know. I mean, you went through one of those bad breakups with me.
Yes. Oh my God. Oh my God.
I mean, if we only had it on video.
I literally ran over her telephone once.
Yeah.
So enough said, like you can imagine.
Yeah, it was bad. She put me on notice. She was like, "You're done with this guy."
I was like, "Move on!" Boom,
she threw it out.
Eliminate this
out
problem.
of the window
Let's
and ran
fix
over
this.
it.
Let's fix this mindset.
It was a beautiful moment.
It was a beautiful moment. It was kind of cute. It was.
I was into it. I mean, I loved the theater.
Right?
So,
it was very theatrical.
Yeah, it was
beautiful. And then we were able to move on, and eventually, I mean, you did get the number back, which I was really pissed about. You managed to get.
Things are not done until they're done, right?
But okay, that is so true too.
You kind of have to see things through to the end. I think
you do, and I think that sometimes when there's a block, maybe there's, so many times, maybe your creative block is your ego just fucking with you. Maybe it's because you haven't found the proper motivation, but maybe sometimes your block is there for a reason. Maybe sometimes you are processing something.
Yeah, maybe you are. Maybe there's an emotional thing that needs to be dealt with.
Maybe sometimes it's not the right time. Maybe you can't deal with it right now. Maybe you're not in the right
So I would say, try to be self-reflective and honest about it so that you don't spend an entire decade wailing on this issue.
Exactly. Deal with it.
Be honest with yourself and say, hey, I'm heartbroken about this situation, or I'm traumatized from this situation, or, I'm whatever it is.
Whatever it is.
Blocked.
I'm
blocked.
You're blocked. Blow out the blockage.
Yeah, I mean, take some Metamucil. Take some creative Metamucil.
I like that very much.
Yeah.
So on that, time for a refill, you guys. So on that lovely note, take some creative Metamucil. Use some modern methods to blow that creative block right out. And I hope that this helped. If you guys have any comments about the old methods versus the new, things that have worked for you versus not. And also if you're interested in hearing more about the whole mindset based ways of getting rid of writer's block and creative block.
This one.
Read
her book.
Writer's block is a pain in the ass, but it's all in your head.
It is all in your head, people.
Yes, but cheers to you guys.
Cheers.
And let us know what you create when you eliminate your writer's block. Cheers. Okay.